Hello and welcome to Prescription for Life. I'm your host, David Bowl. Today we are joined by Daniela Abdul-Bar, licensed pharmacist, Deshaun Industrious, liaison with the Fulton County Department of Health and Wellness, and Richard Johnson, president of Air Allergen and Mold Testing. Ms. Abdul-Bar and Mr. Johnson are co-chairs of the Fulton Asthma Improvement and Reduction Coalition, commonly known as the Asthma Coalition. Today are three members from the Fulton Asthma Improvement and Reduction Coalition. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Ladies first.
Okay, my name is Daniela Abdul-Bar. I'm a registered pharmacist in Georgia. And I'm also an executive field leader with a major retailer, pharmacy retailer. I've been practicing pharmacy for 21 years, and I've been happily married for 21 years.
And Richard?
My name is Richard Johnson. I'm president of Air Allergen and Mold Testing. I got involved in the mold testing as a result of a project that I did over in Louisiana, and I realized that some of the knowledge about indoor air quality in particular was not prevalent in Atlanta. I believe we could help people here with asthma. I've been an asthmatic for my entire life. And so we set this company up about 10 years ago, and much of the information that I've been able to bring to the coalition has come as a result of the studies that we've done over the last 10 years.
And I am a public health professional. I graduated from Mercer University with my master's in public health, and I've had the pleasure of working with the Department of Health and Wellness here in Fulton County for the past year. And
why did you all get involved with the Asthma Coalition? Well, obviously being a sufferer and focusing on it for your basically life, Richard, that's understandable, but the rest of you?
I think for me personally, being a registered pharmacist, a healthcare provider, it's really critical that we get the information and word out about how we can support asthma sufferers, helping them with self-management of the disease, and creating some real key insight about how we can help support them in their outcomes in life.
And Deshaun?
And myself, like Richard, I'm an asthmatic. I was diagnosed with asthma at the age of 7. I still remember my first asthma attack, and I remember how I felt going through it. So now, as a public health professional, I'm able to help others the way I needed help.
Well, setting the personal experience aside, why is asthma important?
Well, asthma is important. First of all, I want to thank you for having us here today and helping us get our message out. I think if we think about why asthma is important, it really gets back to what is asthma and understanding how asthma impacts people and their quality of life. And asthma is just basically a chronic condition that affects the lungs, and there is marked inflammation always present. So even if an asthma sufferer is episode free, they're still going to have that inflammation that at any given point is going to create the opportunity for airway constriction. And it's a debilitating disease. Oftentimes the asthma sufferer will feel like they're suffocating, if you will. And if not treated appropriately, it could also lead to death.
Well, we're 50-50 here, but Deshaun, how prevalent is asthma?
Asthma is something that is on everyone's radar. It seems nationally and even globally. Here in the United States, we're talking about 7.1 million children who are impacted by asthma, which makes it the leading chronic disease for children in the U.S. Here in Georgia, 8% of adults, 9% of children are affected by asthma. Here in Atlanta, every single year, the Allergy and Asthma Foundation of America comes out with a list of the worst cities for asthma sufferers. In 2007, Atlanta was #1 on that list. Wow. In 2013, we are #9. Wow.
That's a good improvement. So, Richard, what is the Asthma Coalition?
A coalition is the coming together of people who are doing things in their day-to-day lives that overlap the needs of asthmatics. And what we've done is we've brought together people from the medical community, the legal community, the educational community, inspection people are doing inspections and remediation work, and try to bring them common knowledge about the best practices with respect to asthma so that in their day-to-day activities they can incorporate them and help reduce the incidence of asthma throughout the community.
Well, I want to learn a lot more about it. Welcome back to Prescription for Life. We're here with three members of the Fulton Asthma Improvement and Reduction Coalition. Daniela, what is an asthmatic episode?
Well, communities call it, the medical community at least calls it an exacerbation, which is a $10 word for saying it's an attack. You'll find people that suffer from asthma, that's what they refer to it as. But it really is the body's response specifically the lung, to some external or internal trigger. And the most commonly known triggers are mold and allergies, pollen in the air, even an emotional state of mind could bring on an asthma episode. And really, it's really stems and breaks down to what's important about how you can self-manage an episode when you have one.
Well, Deshaun, you're the county representative, sort of. We hear that the air quality in Atlanta is improving. So how has that affected the incidence of asthma attacks?
You know, the air quality here in Atlanta has improved a lot. That's in part due to regulations such as the Clean Air Act of 1955, and then you've had a lot of different legislation and standards that have been set for businesses. You had the Clean Air Campaign, and all those things have contributed to really improving the outdoor air. However, with all of those improvements, the incidence of asthma has increased nearly 400% since 1950.
Wow. Well, Richard, why is that?
I don't think that there's a single reason. There certainly could be a genetic component, for instance. But one of the things is that since World War II, we've replaced plaster and hardwood floors in the home with drywall and carpeting. Those materials are far more likely to contain allergens. A second thing that's happened is that we've tightened up the envelope in the home as a result of air filtration and energy needs. And so the air that's staying inside, even if the outdoor air is improving, the indoor air is not improving. And what is inside stays inside the home. So these factors are all things that contribute to changes that were being experienced. One of the things that the EPA has pointed out is that back in 1950s, we spent about 60% of our time indoors, and presently we're spending 90% of our time indoors. One of the studies that was brought out by the National Institute of Health suggests that the indoor air quality can be 2 to 5 times as polluted as the outdoor air, and in some cases they found pollution levels up to 100 times.
So in our efforts to become energy efficient, we're actually trapping more pollution inside rather than letting a flow go through.
That's really true. We just had our knowledge about how to manage the indoor air quality has not kept up with those changes in our environment.
Well, it helps with my energy bill, but apparently not with my health. So Deshaun, what are some of the goals of the Asthma Coalition?
The primary goal of the Asthma Coalition is to reduce the prevalence and the associated financial costs of asthma here in Fulton County. We plan on doing that through health education, medical treatment, and also improving the indoor air quality, as Richard touched on the importance of that. When you talk about the financial costs associated with asthma, here in Fulton County and Atlanta, those costs range anywhere from $60 to $200 million every single year. So that's something that we have to do something about. And the taxpayers are paying for a lot of that cost. And if you think about what that money could be used for elsewhere, that's something that's really powerful.
So what strategy have you developed to achieve those goals?
Well, we have a two-part approach because we want to redirect the costs, as Deshaun kind of touched on, from Fulton County government right directly into where those asthma sufferers will be managed the best. So we want to redirect them from the emergency room and hospitalizations. The second approach, Richard really touched upon it from an environmental perspective, is getting the message out to Fulton County residents about how they can create a breather-friendlier home and the things that they need to do to manage that. And from that perspective, it's not really just about asthma sufferers. Anybody that has a respiratory or breathing problem, we want to help support getting the message out around self-management. But we've organized the conversation and approach in 4 categories. We want to focus on airborne triggers, surface triggers, humidity control, and then the timely and appropriate execution of an asthma plan for self-management and treatment.
Okay, well, let's take those one at a time. What about airborne triggers?
Okay.
Well, airborne, because asthma has to do with what we breathe matters. And many of the triggers that come to influence an asthma episode come in by what we breathe. For instance, pest detritus, dust mites, cockroach detritus, the mold spores, that type of thing come into our lungs. And what happens is it gets into the lining of the lungs, which are already partially damaged from the chronic condition of asthma. and you wind up with an allergic reaction similar to what you would have if you had a little mosquito bite. So the redness and swelling increases, and it restricts the amount of air that can go into your lungs, and therefore you feel like your chest is real heavy and like you can't breathe. You don't get enough oxygen to be able to function properly. Now, while a lot of the stuff that we see as allergens, one of the things that we've come to realize is the importance of respirable particulate. Respirable particulate was originally identified by the EPA when it was first established and as a major pollutant of outdoor air. And they're particularly concerned about the size of the particles that can go down into the air sacs of your lungs where you're exchanging the oxygen.
Is that like the pollen count?
Well, the pollen is pretty good size.
It's part of it.
It's much larger. It doesn't actually get down. It would be more of an allergen. Okay. It doesn't get small enough to get into the air sacs. But there are a lot of particles in the air that are small enough to get down into those air sacs. And when that happens, it tends to clog up and be a problem. The World Health Organization has recently declared that the respirable particulate in the outdoor air is now classified as a carcinogen, and it is classified as more important than secondhand smoke in terms of world health. What we've found in some of the studies that we've done, we went back over last 1,500 or so inspections, and we found that the particle counts indoors are 1.5 to 2.5 times what they typically are outdoors, largely because we're not getting good filtration in the homes. While we haven't separated the respirable particulate from the other kinds of particulate, Johns Hopkins has recently done a study that suggested that even the larger particulate is far more consequence than that they originally thought.
Wow. Well, so what can we do about an airborne triggers?
Well, the first line of defense for airborne triggers is filtration. And we need to have filters in the furnace systems to be able to capture particles that small. We're looking at things in the 3 to 5 micron range, or in some cases down to 1.5 microns. So they have rating systems for filters and furnaces. Most common one is called a MERV rating, and you need to have at least a MERV 8 rated filter. A MERV 10 would be better in order to be able to capture these spores. One of the problems that we have in Atlanta is virtually all of the apartments that we go into have filters that are these see-through fiberglass filters that are incapable of capturing respirable particulate. And so the people are just breathing what's in the air without being able to filter it out. So getting a proper filter is important. Consumer reports, what's more disturbing than that, consumer reports that nationally up to 25% of the people either don't change their filters regularly or they don't have any filters at all. So the filtration is the first line of defense for that. Now, the other thing that happens is because we've tightened up the envelope on the house and we've gotten the HVAC systems to be far more efficient, they don't come on as often. And if the fan in the HVAC system is not operating, you can have the best filter in the world and you have no filtration going on.
There's no flow, there's no filter.
That's right. So one of the things that people can do is turn their thermostat setting for their fan to the on position instead of auto. And that way they're getting filtration even if the system is not calling for temperature modification. This is particularly important in the spring and the fall where it's 70 degrees outside, 70 degrees inside, and it rarely comes on. And of course those are oftentimes when outdoor air pollutants and mold spores in the outdoor air and pollen and that type of thing can affect an asthmatic.
Wow. So let's talk about surface triggers. Deshaun?
Surface triggers are the things that probably get on people's nerves the most when you're talking about asthma. You know, that's the dust, that's the pet dander, that's the pest detritus, that's the mold spores. That's the things that you see on, you know, your countertops, your tables, your stuffed animals, everything that you see around the home. And those are some really powerful triggers. That's why it's really important to really monitor and clean those kind of on a daily or weekly schedule. If you do a little bit every day, then you don't have to do so much later on and it doesn't build up as much. Another way to kind of deal with surface triggers, because it can also get in your clothes, it can get in your hair, so really washing your linen, there are a lot of these dust encasements, kind of dust mite for pillows and beddings and things like that. So those are something else that can be utilized to kind of keep those from becoming a problem. And then also just washing your pet. We love our pets, and a lot of people kind of neglect that. And they also keep their pet with them in their bedrooms, sleep on their beds and things like that. So that just adds to the problem. So those are just a few things to kind of keep the surface triggers down.
Okay.
One of the other really important things about surface triggers is to have a HEPA filter vacuum cleaner. Your carpeting is a major place where a lot of that stuff accumulates. And if you don't have a HEPA filter in your vacuum cleaner, you'll just draw it out of the carpet and broadcast it all over the room for everybody to breathe. Wow. So a HEPA filter is very important in good housekeeping.
Welcome back to Prescription for Life. We're here with Danella Abdul-Bar, Deshaun Industrious, and Richard Johnson from the Fulton Asthma Improvement and Reduction Coalition. Danella, I understand that you're working with the medical community and you're focused on treatment. What can be done to help asthmatics?
A lot. First of all, getting the medical community to understand management, self-management, and control. We have a lot of asthma sufferers that are not adequately controlled on the medications. They're not following up with wellness visits. They're using the emergency room really to treat a disease that, if you manage appropriately, you don't necessarily need to go into the emergency room or, quite frankly, be admitted into the hospital system. Also, making sure that the environmental conversation that we talked about today with the triggers and the filtration conversation is talked about in the medical community, and it really is a part of the asthma plan for self-management.
Yeah, well, it seems like we have control over our own environment, but we're social animals. You can go into a restaurant, you're not going to have those. You're relying on the owner of that restaurant for that filter or that office building. So Richard, we didn't talk about humidity control. How does humidity control help with asthma sufferers?
Well, it's been a long time since damp indoor spaces have been shown to contribute to a sick building syndrome. And one of the ways that it happens is that the humidity is capable of supporting mold growth, particularly in carpets and in some cases on other surfaces. It produces the spores that you breathe. If you can hold the humidity near or below 50% at 70 degrees, you'll significantly retard the growth of mold spores, for instance. The second way that it affects is humidity draws pests, insects in particular. Dust mites get their moisture through their exoskeleton. If you hold it below 50% or near below 50%, there's not enough moisture in the air for them to survive. Excess moisture draws other insects, pests, as well as rodents and that type of thing. So any leaks that you might have that could contribute to elevated humidity should be repaired immediately and cleaned up. And so it really contributes as part of the system that contributes to all of these allergens.
So, Deshaun, we've talked about the goal and the strategy of the coalition, so how are you getting the message out?
We're doing that by going out into the community, raising awareness, increasing education. We're establishing a presence online, especially in this age of social media. We're also using print media. We've developed a brochure which talks about all of these issues. We're going out making presentations at community rec centers, and we're also networking with a variety of professionals here in Atlanta because we realize that everybody has to share in this one cause to come out with the solution that we hope to achieve.
Okay, so Richard, what makes you think that these simple steps are going to make a difference?
Well, there's a number of studies out there, and there's more coming up every day, but three of the most significant ones that we've seen. One came out of Chicago, where they went into homes where people were being in the emergency room and hospitalizations, and they cleaned up the homes from removed moldy materials and generally cleaned up the facility, and they showed a 68% reduction in emergency room visits and hospitalizations. There was a study from the Cincinnati Children's Hospital that was the first study, and that one showed over a 90% reduction in hospitalizations and emergency room treatments. And there was another study out of New York that was done that showed similar response. So we think that there's a lot of data out there. There's dozens of studies in support of these things.
Okay, so Danielle, how do you think the coalition is doing, and what can we do to help?
What we can do to help is get involved. I'm going to give you a number, 404-613-1243. If it's something that you've heard today that you're interested in joining, just give us a call, and we'll be more than happy to have you become a part of this amazing activity. Again, the number is 404-613-1243. And thank you again for having us today.
Well, and someone mentioned a little bit earlier let me look at my notes, the health-friendly home?
Breather-friendly home.
Breather-friendly home. Real quick.
If someone's an asthmatic and they're looking for another place to stay, if they look for the proper things to begin with, they can help themselves. We've prepared a brochure, an asthma brochure, which is available for everyone, that talks about the things we've talked about today. And one of the panels talks about what a breather-friendly home is. That would be hardwood flooring as opposed to carpeting, a MERV 8 or higher filter, HVAC fans on continuous instead of auto, a dehumidifier holding this humidity near 50%, a bathroom and kitchen fans vented to the outside, no crawl space or basement unless it's served by the HVAC systems, a small amount of fresh air introduced to be able to slightly pressurize the house and keep outdoor pollutants from coming in, and repair the leaks, anything that comes in, and practice good housekeeping.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here today. I know we could go into even more. This has been a very information-filled program, and I appreciate you coming to join us. And we hope that you have learned some vital information on today's show. I'm your host, David Bohl, and I'm reminding you to be healthy, active, and well-informed. We'll see you next time.